A couple of nights ago, Lakers rookie Dalton Knecht went 9 of 12 from three-point land against the Utah Jazz, tying a long-standing rookie record for most three-pointers made in an NBA game. A record that I was reminded of last February when Keyonte George hit 9 threes in a game against the Utah Jazz on 16 attempts, the fourth most ever attempted by a rookie in a game. Just utter woke nonsense. So why is this record so important to me? Why does this record tug at my heartstrings just a little bit? For about a decade plus, this record was held by two former Dallas Mavericks legends. Yogi Ferrell, who did it in just the fourth game as a member of the Dallas Mavericks, joining them on a 10-day contract. It was somebody who got picked up off the street. It wasn't a draft pick. It was a 10-day contract for Yogi Ferrell, his second 10-day contract. Fourth game, he went 9 of 11 from 3 against the Portland Trailblazers in a 2016-2017 season that was just a fucking nightmare for the Dallas Mavericks. In fact, I wanted to go back and double check. I haven't used Facebook in any real capacity in over a decade plus. And wouldn't you know it, my Facebook header from 2017 is still Yogi Ferrell hitting a shrug after hitting a 3 against the Portland Trailblazers. I love that man. There was nothing else to root for in Dallas Mavericks fandom at that time. It was the bookend of Dirk Nowitzki's career, and the teams were just terrible with no real youth inside. This was before they even drafted Dennis Smith Jr. So we loved Yogi Ferrell. But before Yogi Ferrell, there was a man in 2010 by the name of Rodrigue Beaubois. That's right, Roddy B, Roddy Buckets, however you remember him as, Free Roddy, whatever you remember him as. Roddy B in 2010 against the Golden State Warriors went 9 of 11 from 3, dropping 40 points. And for nearly 7 years, held a single game record for most three-pointers made in a game by a rookie. And you know what? I figured, what an interesting time to revisit the career of Roddy B. It's something that I've kind of always wanted to do on this channel, never really gotten around to it. And it just feels like, you know, with this record being back in the news and with, I saw it on Twitter, a couple of people were like, yo, did you see who else hit 9 threes? Roddy B and fucking Yogi Ferrell. I thought, you know what? This is a good time to dive into this. If you're a Mavs fan, you know who Roddy B is. Chances are, even if you aren't a Mavs fan and you've been watching the NBA for quite some time, you remember Roddy Beaubois. You remember the expectations. You remember the hype. You remember Mark Cuban famously saying, I'm not trading him for anybody. There's only 2 guys that I would trade Roddy B for. That's something he said. It's the stars that shine the brightest that die out the fastest. First and foremost, let's lay the groundwork right here. Roddy B was listed as 6'2", probably closer to 6 feet if we're being honest. 170 pounds soaking wet. I mean, not a big player by any stretch of the imagination, but what made Roddy B an interesting prospect coming out of the draft was that he did have a freakishly long 6'10" wingspan, was very quick, was very athletic, and could shoot the lights out of the basketball. This was a guy who lived in Guadalupe, really barely played basketball growing up, and was discovered by Michael Petrus at a basketball camp in Guadalupe, played for Cholet in France for 3 years before getting drafted by the Dallas Mavericks 25th overall in the 2009 draft. It's pretty easy to understand why Dallas Mavericks fans got super excited about this kid. Mainly, one, the draft history of the Mavericks was so fucking terrible in the years prior to this that it was just fun and exciting to have a young player with any semblance of upside that you could just feel excited about for once. For example, the Dallas Mavericks drafted Maurice Ager 28th overall in the 2006 draft. Remember him? Do you? You do? You're either related to him or you're lying. You're either related to that man or you're lying. He played in 82 games total in his career, 44 for the Dallas Mavericks. They drafted Pavel Podkolzny 21st overall in the 2004 NBA draft. Remember him? There's no fucking way you remember him. He played 6 total games in the NBA. So any player with even a tiny little shred of upside meant a lot for Dallas Mavericks fans at this time. There was also a decent amount of excitement because nobody really knew who Roddy B was. He didn't go to college in the United States. There wasn't a lot of highlights or film about Roddy B. Not a lot of people even were talking about him in the draft process and the lead up to it. It was widely considered he was going to be a second-round pick, but naturally, with his freakishly long wingspan and with his athleticism, he was going to climb up some draft boards. But the Dallas Mavericks, who already really, really liked Roddy B, due in large part to the fact that his agency at the time, ComSport, was located in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which meant the Mavericks got nice little private workout sessions with Roddy B before the draft. And Mark Cuban and the gang knew that teams are going to fall in love with Roddy B during the draft process. So they were already committed to spending a first-round pick on Roddy Beaubois. And then they lucked out a little bit because day one of the draft combine, he hurt his wrist, had to pull out of the combine, and did no more private workouts, which means no other team in the league really knew what they were getting with Roddy B except for the Dallas Mavericks, who ended up drafting him 25th overall in the 2009 draft. And the rest is history. Another great draft pick. And look, it wasn't like he came into the league just lighting the world on fire. It's important to remember this was an old Dallas Mavericks team full of vets that was trying to compete for an NBA championship at the time. Not a lot of playing time for a 25th overall pick rookie. From opening night of the season until March 1st, Roddy B only played in 36 games, averaging 10 minutes per game and 5 points per game. And there were definitely some flashes here and there. I mean, the Mavericks had a go-to play that they ran for Roddy B that was coined the Roddy Oop, where Roddy B would have the ball at the top of the key. They would run staggered screens for Jason Kidd to distract the help defense. Roddy B would kick it to Jason Kidd, and then Dirk or whoever else really would set a back screen for Roddy, who would cut to the hoop and get a just perfectly placed lob by Jason Kidd. I mean, Jason Kidd was a fucking quarterback out there, man. It's insane what he was doing. But it wasn't until a stretch in March during his rookie season that we really got the full Roddy Buckets experience, and his star potential really started to show. After 3 straight DNPs, he had a 6-game stretch where he averaged 17 points per game on 54% shooting. This all, of course, led to the game that millions and millions spoke about for years following. March 27th in Golden State against the Warriors. He checks in late in the first quarter, hits a nice little midi pull-up shot for his first shot of the game, and then he really showed off some of that athleticism and speed and potential, grabbing a rebound, taking it the full 94 feet to get a tough and one bucket towards the end of the first quarter. And then in the second quarter, he just went nuclear. 21 points, 8 of 11 from the field, 5 of 6 from deep in the second quarter of the game alone, finishing the game with 40 points, 15 of 22 from the field, and 9 of 11 from the three-point line. A brief little aside about this game. It is kind of funny looking at this. The starting 5 for the Golden State Warriors on this night: Stephen Curry, rookie season Steph Curry, Monte Ellis, future Dallas Mavericks legend, Corey Maggette, Anthony Morrow, and Ronnie Turiaf, with Reggie Williams, Anthony Tolliver, CJ Watson coming off the bench. It's crazy to think that in just 5 years' time, this Golden State Warriors team would be maybe the best team we've ever seen play basketball. But on a March night in 2010, they looked like shit, and Roddy B looked like the future Splash Brother. It's crazy what 5 years can do. It really is. I mean, 5 years ago, I was happy. This 40-point game from Roddy B, it just showed the future. It gave Mavericks fans something to look forward to. This was an old roster with not a lot of young talent. And keep in mind, they were coming off of seasons of playoff disappointment. Jason Kidd, a 2011 finals run really kind of saved the second stint in Dallas for Jason Kidd because it was not going well. He was getting torched and eaten alive in the playoffs. Dirk had grown a reputation for being a soft European choker. Things were looking bleak for the Mavericks. And during Roddy B's rookie season, they made the playoffs as the 2 seed and ended up losing to the 7 seed San Antonio Spurs. And in Game 6 of that series, we got to see more flashes of the future superstar to be, Roddy B. After barely playing at all in the first 5 games of the series, the Dallas Mavericks, down 3-2, had their backs against the wall, were trailing 22-8 after the first quarter. 22-8. After the first quarter, just desperate for anything, desperate for a sign of life, Rick Carlisle brought Roddy B off the bench halfway through the second quarter, finished the entire first half, started the second half, played till about the 4-minute mark in the third quarter, where he got pulled and unfortunately did not go in until the closing minutes of the game when it was all but decided. But in the 20 minutes of game time, Roddy B had 16 points on 7 of 13 shooting and was a plus 10. I mean, he completely and totally changed the dynamic of this do-or-die must-win playoff game for the Dallas Mavericks, and in fact led them all the way back in this game where they had a lead at one point in the third quarter. And Rick Carlisle pulling him in the third quarter to rest him and never putting him back in led to quite a bit of controversy. I mean, Mark Cuban was straight up asked whether or not they were going to fire Rick Carlisle after this game. And it's funny, in my research for this, I stumbled across this message board from 2010. Is Rick Carlisle the worst coach in the NBA? Roddy Beaubois combined with Dirk to get the Mavs back in the game. Then what does Rick Carlisle do? Rest Beaubois for almost the entire fourth quarter so Jason Terry can play and do absolutely nothing. Worst coach in the West is Rick Carlisle. Worst in the East is Woodson. Comment Poor Dallas fans. Now, what's funny about that comment right there, the poor Dallas fans, that was from a Lakers fan. And we know what happened a year later. It is funny reading this because just a little bit over a year later after this moment, the Dallas Mavericks, of course, would become world champions. And a lot of that had to do with Roddy B and his contributions to that team. Is that true? No. It went all downhill from here. This was, unbeknownst to us, the beginning of the end. In an exit interview the following day after the season ended for the Mavericks, Rick Carlisle made it a point that he's going to have to find more time for Roddy B and that his performance in Game 6 against the Spurs was a sign of things to come for this franchise and a sign that the franchise is taking a new step with Roddy B, where Roddy B's supposed to have this huge role. I mean, look at some of these quotes in this article written by Zach Crane for D Magazine in October of 2010. Yes, Dallas Maverick Roddy Beaubois can. He's played basketball for only 6 seasons, but he's bringing change we can believe in. I don't know if this is like a play on the Obama 2008 campaign thing. That shit had the entire country in a stranglehold. So it probably is. I mean, listen to these quotes. In October, just before the start of camp, Tom Zeller of AOL's NBA Fan House, AOL. This was in 2010. Like, I read that sentence and my mind thinks 1998. The Mavs season depends on Beaubois bursting out and Coach Rick Carlisle using him properly. Beaubois is the only hope. Around the same time, ESPN's John Hollinger had a similar but slightly more measured take. A more valid reason to believe Dallas can keep up its string of 50 wins is the one good young player they have in the pipeline, Rodrigue Beaubois. He added that any chance the Mavericks have of winning anything important depends on Beaubois. Wow. Now, unfortunately for our guy, Roddy Buckets, that was not meant to be. And it is interesting reading these quotes, knowing that just a few months later, they go on to win the NBA Finals. It just continues to go to show how incredible of a run that was. But in a training camp for the French national team during that offseason, Roddy B broke his left foot, which unfortunately led to a surgery. Now, what was interesting about all of this is they expected Roddy B to be back pretty early on in the season. In fact, there was even some hopes that he could be back for the start of the season, but that was just not the case. He had a setback. There was a lot of speculation at the time that he broke his foot again during his rehabilitation process, and he didn't make his season debut until February 16th. Of 2011. And over the last couple of months of that season, he averaged 8 points per game on 50% true shooting, only 30% from three. And even though he was put into the starting rotation upon returning, he was benched the final game of the season for Deshaun Stevenson, who we know would go on to hit some big threes. Hey, LeBron, how's my Dirk taste? We all remember that very well. But not only did Roddy B get benched the last game of the season, but he also suffered a left foot sprain the final game of the season, the same foot that he broke before the season started. He did not play a single game during the Mavs 2011 finals run and unfortunately needed another surgery in June of 2011 to clean up that left foot. And that was just kind of that. After that 40-point explosion his rookie season, he only scored 20 points or more in a game twice in the last 3 years of his career. Now, he was ready to start the 2011-2012 season after getting that foot surgery, but he was just never really the same. I mean, that was just obvious to anybody who watched. He averaged nearly 9 points per game in 53 games during the 2011-2012 season, 28% from three, 49% true shooting, and reports started to come out in February of that year that the Mavericks were very actively shopping Roddy Beaubois on the trade market. Keep in mind, this comes nearly 2 years after Mark Cuban said, there's maybe one or two guys in the league that I would trade for him. Cuban said, that's it. Other than that, he's pretty much untouchable. After his rookie season, Mark Cuban said, we could have gotten a lottery pick for Roddy last night, referring to the 2010 draft. So that tells you the kind of respect that the league has for that young man, and he's not going anywhere because we love him. Fast forward 2 years, I was joking. He's probably going somewhere. The Mavericks held on to him, and during the 2012-2013 season, a season from hell for the Mavericks, a season in which they did not make the playoffs for the first time in, I don't remember what it was, like 15 fucking years. Roddy B averaged 4 points per game on 29% from three, averaging a career low 12 minutes per game. And unfortunately, on March 17th against the Oklahoma City Thunder, he broke his left hand, which required season-ending surgery, and it was the last time that Roddy B stepped on an NBA court. Now, that's not to say that that was the end of his playing career. He's gone on to have a fairly successful career over in Europe, playing for Efes, one of the top basketball clubs over in Europe. Him and former Mavericks legend Shane Larkin went on to win the 2021 and 2022 EuroLeague, as well as the 2018-2019, 2020-2021, and 2022-2023 Turkish National Championship. And he's still playing right now. I mean, he's still a captain of this roster. And look, there's some former NBA guys on this team. Like I mentioned, Dallas Mavericks legend Shane Larkin. You got Jordan Nwora here, Stanley Johnson, Vincent Poirier. It's unfortunate that Roddy B never panned out for the Dallas Mavericks. And it's interesting to think like what the franchise looks like if it had worked. Like if the things went right with his rehab, with his left foot, and he was playing at the start of the 2010-2011 season, what does that team look like? Because they really needed Deshaun Stevenson and Peja Stojakovic during that 2011 finals run. I wonder, does Roddy B playing change that? Does that make them worse? Does that make them better? What does the last 6 or 7 years of Dirk's career, which just ended up being shit shows? They never won a playoff series with Dirk after the 2011 finals run. What does that team look like if Roddy B's blossoming into like a top 40, top 30 player in the sport? Do they ever get Luka Doncic? Is he still in the league today? Like he was in the 2009 draft. He was in the same draft as Steph Curry. Is there a world where Roddy B pans out and is still playing NBA basketball today? I mean, yeah, there's definitely a world out. There's definitely a universe out there. There's a universe where I'm in the NBA. Like if we want to think that the universe is infinite, because the universe is infinite. So in theory, there should be repeating infinite numbers of time. And I did find it interesting. And for some reason, I did not know this. In 2016, the Dallas Mavericks offered Roddy B a contract to come back to the States and play with the Mavs, which he turned down to stay in Europe. I did not know that happened. I did not know that the Mavericks offered him a multi-year contract to come back. I don't know. I love stats like these. I love records like these, especially single game records, especially like rookie records, because it allows us to go back in history and look at some of these guys. I mean, if you look at this list right here, the guys who have hit 8 or more threes as a rookie in an NBA game. I mean, look at some of the names on this list, huh? Landry Shamet. How about Alec Peters? I mean, that's a story for another day. Alec Peters played in 20 career NBA games, and on April 10th, 2018 against the Dallas Mavericks, he popped off for 8 threes. Now, I will say, this is one of the most consequential, random performances a player has had in quite some time, because that loss solidified the Mavericks as the 5th worst team in the league, which ended up giving them the 5th pick in the NBA draft that year, which they used to trade up for Luka Doncic. I don't know. I love stuff like this. I thought this was a really good opportunity to go back and look at the career of Roddy B and what could have been, what was, what went wrong. And, shout out to Dalton Knecht. I forgot that he was the point for this whole entire video. He's looked great so far.